Well, hello everyone. Welcome back to the next edition of the DFS Down Under show presented by Draftstars. And as we all know, Draftstars, Australia's number one daily fantasy platform for Australian and New Zealand customers to play AFL Daily Fantasy. Welcome back for another show. This is round 19. We're doing the Power and the Magpies on Friday night. And as always, my guru is next to me. Big Hef, how are you, mate?
Well, good, thanks, mate. A bit later this week, only one game to sink our teeth into. So I've come up with a couple of little left field stats on a couple of these players just to, we've got the focus on the one game. So I'm looking forward to them.
Now, I'm also looking forward to all of our viewers who are actually live with us on the stream here on Thursday evening. And also a shout out to our replay viewers. If you're on the podcast or watching us on YouTube or Facebook on Draftstars, welcome to you all. Thanks for joining by. Massive $75,000 contest. And look, it was a bit hairy there for a while there, Hef, knowing with the COVID situation around the country. But it's we got some footy, which is great to see. Look, we don't care where they're playing at the moment. I mean, Port, didn't Port have to do the left and right and back left again?
They did. Well, I was surprised that they actually went with Marvel Stadium over the G. Surely you'd want to play at the G. But the bright side of no crowds is they get to shut the roof. So that's a plus. Well, even though at night you don't have to really worry about the sun or anything. But still, I would have gone for the G myself.
Yes, I would have gone for the G myself too. It's bizarre, but good on the Port.
Do you think they were spooked from the last time they played and they? I was just going
to mention that, Hef. Yes, because obviously they had a shocker last time. So maybe they want to bury some demons. You never know. But we are waffling along. Let's just get it stuck into some Draftstars action. But before we do, always a shout out to our golden ticket winners for the Draftstars $300,000 live final. Here we go. Here are this week's winners, including Ian426, James Ryan, Delmy31, Mud BXNE, Frio Blood, B323, Gatsit, and Clangers. Finally got there too. There was a bit of talk around that. I thought he's already got one, but no. Going through the archives, it took his while getting his two tickets there, Hef.
Yeah, he's big name Clangers finally got in. I think he's been at both live finals before, Smatho.
Yes, he has been to both live finals. So we're looking forward to catching up him. So, but to all the guys who got a golden ticket, well, congratulations for 2 thumbs up to you guys, mate. We're down to 20. Right now there is a NRL match with a golden ticket. So once that run and done by Friday morning, we'll be down to 19 tickets. So we're not far away from a golden ticket field for the $300,000 live final. So good luck to everyone who's got a ticket. All right, Hef, let's break down this particular match, the Power and the Magpies. Take note of the time of bounce on Friday. It's usually a later time, but this week it's actually 7:10. They're trying to squeeze in the old Olympics afterwards. So cool. Shout out to all the Olympians out there who have to wait until this Pies match is over. Currently, the Power $1.35 favourites, Lions 18.5. This is before they might have been blown out a bit with the news earlier this evening. 151.5 is the line. As we had mentioned, we are at Marvel Stadium. The roof's shut, so no issue with that. No crowd in attendance, as we all know. As for the teams, Hef, the three amigos are back. Dersma, Butters, and Rosie out of their draft class. They all come back for the Power. We've lost Lynott, we've lost Mays, we've lost Frederick, and we've lost McEntee. They're all been omitted. For the Pies, some new blood have come into the side. Tohill, Giovan, and Finlay McRae come back to the side. And also Poulter was the med sub, but he's been given a full game this week. Chris Mayne, Will Hoskin-Elliott, Josh Thomas, and Callum Brow have all out due to injuries. So break that down, Hef. Obviously, Pies are just playing the kids. Whoever's left on their list are getting a game. But what's that mean for our DFS players?
I want you to break down that second name again. Ginnivan, I think it is, Smatho.
Ginnivan. Giovan.
Yes, like Finnegan. Ginnivan, which we'll touch on him a bit later. Let's the Port, like those changes for Port, they've left out some battlers and they've brought in some cream, haven't they? Dersma, Butters, Rosie, wonderful names, and the guys going out. Anyone who played Martin Frederick last week, you'd be happy to see the back of him. He was very popular on the Saturday and was completely allergic to the footy. Collingwood, on the other hand, bring in, as you say, the kids. We've seen a bit of Finlay and McRae. We haven't seen the other two. We'll touch on them as we get to their positions a bit later, I think. But you see they lose a few small forward winger types there, plus Main, who's been just gorging himself every week for the last couple of months. So there's a bit of ball to go around that Main's not going to be there for, but I'm not sure these new guys are the ones that are going to be getting it, Smatho.
Okay, fair enough. Let's get on to daily fantasy rankings, as always, the number one resource tool for your AFL DFS. And what do the tools say this week? Here they are, mate. So in the last 5 matches, the Pies have conceded only 1.800 plus scores, which is actually worse in the league. So they've actually been really tight here. Also, the last 5 matches, the Power have only conceded 58 average fantasy points per opposition backs. Power still number 1 in the league for not conceding to opposition forwards. So they're stingy in the backs, they're stingy in the forwards. But both teams are top 5 for possessions accumulated. But I've got here in brackets, I won't be taking too much notice of possessions conceded for overall season, because since that old Harvey's come into the coaching ranks, the Pies have really stopped opposition fantasy scoring. So we'll break this down position by position in a minute, but what do you think of what's been happening at the Pies in the last month and a half?
Well, we haven't dealt with the Pies much, have we, Smatho? Usually we'd be dealing with the Pies every second week, but they've been going bad. They've been getting the boot off these big Friday, Thursday night matches. So, yeah, interesting to see those numbers, actually, because we were just piling into the Pies opposition earlier in the year. I'd probably still lean to... Well, coming up against Port, we know that Port aren't going to give up many points. So we do have a game from a couple of months ago where we mentioned where Power snuck home, but we did see Collingwood possess a lot of the footy. It'd be interesting to see if the game plan's similar there again, which, considering how close they got there, the Pies, I reckon they might employ similar tactics.
All right, let's have a look at this particular match, which is the $75,000 Power versus Magpies. As I said, it's a 10 past 7, so don't get caught out on an early lock there. And as always, we start here with the Rucks. We've got 4 options for you this week, Hef. Brodie Grundy at 15,670 did have a bit of a downer last week after everyone else piled into him going up against Tom de Koning. So hopefully he's a bit of a bounce back situation here. But he goes up against Scott Lycett at 12,950, and Peter Laddams keeps his spot on the side at 10,520, and then Darcy Cameron is your traditional centre half forward / full forward type of operator, 9,910. Look, this probably will decide your makeup of your side if you do go pretty expensive with Grundy. License sitting there at just under 13K seems to be the one that could gain less ownership over those 4. Would that be a agreeable take there?
Well, it's very interesting, this ruck setup, actually, because Grundy, there's a bit of history with Grundy and Lycett. If you can remember back to when Lycett was playing at the Eagles and Natanui went down in that wonderful grand final, Lycett was almost a tagger on Grundy. So whether that sort of continues here, we don't have much of a guide from earlier in the year because Lycett didn't play. He was suspended and Laddams went with Grundy. Well, I say went with because pretty loosely because Grundy had 142.
Yes.
Interesting, Laddams got 90 odd himself there with only 10 hit-outs, but obviously he's going to be playing more forward than probably Lycett. Lycett will take the bulk of the ruck play. So that makes a pretty tall up forward there with Dixon, Marshall, and then Georgiades and Laddams. And then we've got Darcy Cameron, who, well, he's crept up in price there to 10K. He can have a big game, but Port's not really a great matchup here, I wouldn't have thought. He only had 50-odd last time playing that forward and backup ruck role. So we know how hard it is to score against Grundy. We know how hard it is for the second ruck. The only sort of angle I've got here is that Laddams being the second ruck, he gets to go against Darcy Cameron when he gets his ruck time. So he avoids Grundy a bit there. If you are looking at a Port win, then Ladhams can get on the end of a few. Those numbers are obviously a bit skewed by his loan racking time when Lysett was out of the game. But to be honest, I don't really like any of the options, Smatho. How's that work?
No. I thought you would say that. Like, I thought you would have came out the gates and saying, yep, I really like this guy, but the way you were saying it, I thought, no, you're not going to pin one for me. But I'm going to go with Grundy here at 15,670. Look, that 77 could scare a few off, which is great. Might get his ownership down. I think the price is okay. He does have that 140 ceiling in him out of all these four guys. He has the highest ceiling. We have some value on the slate, so I reckon I'm going to get Grundy in my ruck for this particular team.
Don't mind that. I wouldn't be so quick to write off Lysett. If he doesn't do a roll on Grundy, like that might mean he gets a little bit more of the other. He might get a little bit more of the ruck share. He did have 82 against Gawn, which is the hardest matchup in the comp just a fortnight ago. Coming off a big 100 against the Saints. Like, I wouldn't put the pen through Lysett, even though he's up against Grundy. He seems to step up when the challenger's there, Lysett. So for that reason, I find it hard to split them all. But Grundy, fair enough. Like, how could you?
Grundy's fair enough. Lysett's fair enough. And Jamie's put a line through Ladhams after selecting in his initial build. So let's have a look at the defenders. Now, I started writing notes about Chris Mayne, and I thought, why is he $14,000? And as he said, he's been gouging in his role there for the Pies. But no, he's out with an ankle injury, so we don't have him to worry about. But I'm going to scroll right down the bottom, straight off here. Ooh. Right down the bottom here, one of our first cheap guys here at Trey Orozco at 5,050. What brought this to your attention is the 77 last week. Do you expect another similar role what you had last week against the Blues?
Look, I don't see why not. It's not like they've brought in a player that's going to sort of replace his role, and they lose Mayne from that back line there as well. I would much prefer to have been on him last week when he had been disappointing everyone all year, and then you catch the 77. But his price hasn't gone up much at all. He's obviously got pretty... he's obviously got a good ceiling for 5K. In terms of how to attack these defenders as well, if we think back when these two teams played a couple of months ago, I'm just going to read out some numbers for you here, Smatho. There was 15, 15, 13, 12. Those numbers from the backs. Well, maybe not Poulter for 12, but 15 for Darcy Moore, 15 for Jordan Roughhead, 13 for Chris Mayne. That was the mark numbers for these defenders. Maynard had 8 marks. Crispy had 7. Noble had 6. They'd really chip the ball around the back line. So if that tactic comes up again for the Pies, then he's got to be making value at 5K, surely.
Yep. No, I reckon he's going to be making... he played off like a little half-back back pocket, had probably one of the Carlton Smalls, but he didn't really play on them last week. So I really like this matchup here, 5,050. But let's go scroll up.
He's going to be really popular, isn't he?
He's going to be popular. Let's talk about port options. Very popular options, as always. Dan Houston at 10,690 seems to be on a trajectory that he's no good anymore. Darcy Byrne-Jones is also there. He's got that 100-point ceiling, but struggled in the last couple of weeks as well. And then if we come down here, one that will probably gain the most ownership here is Ryan Burton at 9,700 after his 100 fantasy point effort last week. Would it be safe to go Burton, or should we start looking at pivots away from other options?
Well, he's still probably pretty cheap, Burton, when you consider the week before there, that 70. He had 70 at half time. Wasn't really seen in the third quarter, and then he had some sort of issues with a soft tissue injury and called it quits a bit early there in the last quarter. So that's his last few weeks has been really good, and they do give up points. We knew earlier in the year, backs against Collingwood was just load the truck up and get as many in as you can. But it's come down a little bit, but you sort of look a couple of weeks ago, Short top scored for Richmond with a ton. The week before, Jack Sinclair had his biggest score of the season with 112. Brad Hill was also run around halfback on 99. So the sort of halfback flanker can still get the points against Collingwood. So Burton sort of fits that bill. He doesn't really do too much damage. He seems to get a lot of mark kicks of just nothing. So I think he's definitely in the traps. I think Riley Bonner might float back. He's probably a similar one. We saw they dropped the likes of Lienert and Frederick, who have both been playing back. So Bonner, he has been pushing up to the wing from time to time, but he might find himself a bit more in the back line. Same might go for Bergman. I think all those cheap options are pretty good. Even Houston, like, if you're bagging him, Smatho, that's usually the time to get on because everyone else would be thinking the same thing. You might get him at pretty good ownership for a pretty good price for Houston if you're banking on him to turn it around. So there's heaps of options here. Like as I ran through those Collingwood numbers, be more than happy to play a couple of Collingwood backs as well, and hope they go with that similar game style too. So my backs are going to depend on what sort of game script you have for each lineup because, you could play a lot of these guys.
Yeah. I like your narratives in terms of what happened last time, but the data is on the flip side saying that no, Port have been stingy, so you might have to have a bit of a bob each way here. And I'm going to just go click on Burton here at 9,700. I think that price is pretty good. Look, it is chalky, but I could pivot elsewhere if I'm playing multiple lineups, especially with Bonner and possibly a bit more Bergman as well.
So Bergman, Bonner, Houston, they're all capable in the midfield. Well, not capable. You can pick them in your midfield as well. So you can link things up there if you want to. So there's heaps of options down back, and you've landed on the chalk already, Smatho.
Yep, and Jamie agrees already, saying this is going to be a duplicate because everyone will love it and they want to play it.
Where are we going to go different, Smatho? In the mids?
In the mids. So in the mids, like we always we talk up a bit of nighttime wines, the wine low, but now it's a primetime wines. It's 17,280. Look at these scores here, mate. Look at 100. Was 150 odd last week? 140, 105, 151. It's just great going there for one of the Brownlow favourites. But that price, 17,280, is a bit of a hard cash to swallow. So can we look elsewhere? Can we go the fade on Ollie Wines, especially with other Port midfielders?
I'm not necessarily fading him at just because he's 17,000. You only have to look the last few weeks. We saw 155 from Sam Walsh against the Pies. We saw 157 from Jack Steele against the Pies. Wines has shown he can hit 150. And I reckon if he does hit 150, you won't be too worried about that $17,000 price tag. So I think he's fine to play Wines even at that high price. Boakey, 13K, it seems pretty easy to plug into a lot of your teams. Boakey, very consistent.
300 games, though. I talked up Jack Lee 300 last week. So is this a milestone match where they just pull out 120 out of their rear end for their milestone game, or they just float around like Sean Burgoyne and just don't do much?
Oh, no, we've talked about Boakey getting 5-6 touches in the last minute a couple of weeks ago. I don't think he'll be floating around Boakey. He knows where the ball is. On the flip side, Port have actually been giving up points to some of the big midfielders as well. Petrarca had 150 against them. So you got to look at, I know he's on the rundown sheet here, Smatho, Jordan De Goey. What are you thinking? Yes. He's up to 13K now.
Look at those 4 scores. He's in the midfield now. You just have to treat him as a midfielder that rests up forward, like in the Dusty kind of role, the Patrick Cripps kind of role, the Stringer kind of role. Like that's that hybrid player now that can lead to fantasy goodness.
Like the price has gone up, but it hasn't gone up enough.
Price has gone up, but look at the marks. He's just chip mark. If the marks continue, and if you say that Collingwood employs that style of gameplay, he's going to get 100.
It hasn't caught up yet. Easy. I think he'd be very highly owned, and I think it's for good reason.
He's going in. He's not going in my midfield. He's actually a forward player, so he's going to go in there. So I might as well put him in there now. Let's get back in the mids, though. You talked about, obviously, Port giving up. I also want to talk about Taylor Adams, 14,050. Has he gone well lately against the Power?
I don't think he played earlier in the season. He's obviously injured for a while. He fits the mould, though, of the inside player who's been going okay against Port. Port play a pretty contested style, so you find the opposition contested midfielders tend to get a fair bit of action. So it still seems a pretty good price there for Adams, 14,000. There's a few attractively priced midfielders here. So, and then obviously you got the new Port guys there at the $11,000 and $10,000 mark as well.
Yeah, it's tough here because Xavier Dursman, Butters, and Connor Rosie have all come back on the side. They're all around that 10 to 11K mark. If you're gone with, say, a Wines instead of like a Taylor Adams, that you probably come down to one of these guys. For myself, I think there's just too much salary there for me to consider him. So I'm actually going to come down here a bit further down. Caleb Poulter at 9,520. Now, you look at those scores there thinking, what are you thinking, Smatho? But those two twin hundreds there back in May and June, you got a fair crack in the midfield. I reckon with no Callum Brown, who's out of the side, who was taking up all those CBAs. I reckon Haas will say, look, mate, have a few of those, see how you go in this contested style of game. What do you reckon?
Yeah, well, he did turn up last time against Port, so that'd be a wonderful result at 9,000. Yeah, I can't say much. He did get dropped there. A pretty ordinary game, but obviously he came back as the sub last week, so you don't have to worry about that 12. I've got no knock there on Poulter. Bianco's, there's a lot of these guys you can play mid-forward through the pie. There's a lot of cheap guys. Let's get stuck into a couple of the cheap guys already. Jack, what's his last name, Smatho?
Ginnivan.
Beautiful. A couple of stats for you on Jack Ginnivan. Did kick 119 goals in one season as a junior, and did have a year off when he was 15 and played netball instead. So everyone talks about basketball backgrounds. This kid's got a netball background. He's very talented sort of small forward. But we're not looking at a huge possession getter. He's kicked a few bags in recent weeks. Talking poor man's Toby Green. I'm sort of more thinking poor man's Brian Myers to start with. That's the sort of player we're looking at here. I don't think he's going to be a huge possession getter in this game. I think Port Adelaide's a pretty hard match to come in and score up forward, but 5,000, I wouldn't say don't, but I think there's better options. I think Rusco's a better option. I think Finlay McRae might be a better option. Do we see McRae in the midfield this time, Smatho?
Yes.
You think so?
We can't hide all these kids in the forward pocket. So
no,
someone's got to run through there and give DeGoey and Pendlebury and Adams a chop out.
Yeah, I think maybe even off a wing. Obviously, Hoskin Elliott was playing a bit off the wing. He didn't get a whole lot of midfield time earlier in the season. He sort of had a quarter or two in there, and I thought he looked all right, McRae. So I'll be pretty keen to have a fair bit of him in my lineups at 5,000. Yeah,
I'm pretty keen too. You probably take that Hoskin Elliott / Chris Mayne kind of mould. Like there is a couple of wings there up for grabs, so I expect him to float in there. And being a forward player as well, I am pretty keen to put him in as me second forward. So let me put him in there for now. I know we're jumping around the place, but yes. And now the other forward cheap guys here for Anton Tohill. Tell me a little about him.
Tohill, so he's an Irish man. Apparently his old man was a Gaelic footy superstar. He's 2 meters tall. Hasn't got a cool name like 7-seater Peter. He's been thrown around a little bit. Apparently he's a really good kick. What's with these Irishmen that are really good kicks of the ball when they come out? They haven't even used our footy, and next thing you know, they can kick it better than our blokes. But apparently he's a real good kick. He's been bouncing around until he finds his position, but he's found it sort of playing as a tall defender. So he's probably going to be needed where we talked about Marshall and Laddams and Dixon and Georgiades trying to stretch the pies up forward. He'll come in pretty handy here. So apparently he's not a huge fan of the contested things, so he might find himself on a Marshall or a Laddams. I would lean against playing him at 5,000. But if you are going on this Collingwood chip the ball around the back line sort of theory, playing him in the forward line to link up with a couple of Pies backs, it wouldn't be the worst idea in the world because he can actually kick the ball pretty well. So I don't think they're going to worry too much about trying to avoid him. I think if he's in the link in the chain, I think they will use him. So I would use him in Pies back stacks, but apart from that, I'll probably give him a miss.
Yeah, let's see him first up. Prefer McRae in this spot, especially in your forward line. Let's come back to the mids. We haven't really talked about other options here around this. We talked about the Dersma, Butters, Drew setup. Below that, not much really there. Nathan Murphy at 6,000. So I've got here 13,800 spare. Now this sounds like I'm building a real another chalky lineup, but you still can't go past that Pendlebury solid 12,000 salary there because we know that still side bottom's done unless he pulls something out of his bottom. You agree that he's done?
Out of the side bottom, he's just not looking there at all. Is he? Still, he's still building that price back up from that down period he had earlier in the year when he had that sort of finger injury. So he looks at maybe the ceiling's not quite there anymore for Pendlebury, but he's got a pretty decent floor. So yeah, he's a pretty reliable guy to plug in at 12,000, I think.
Now, there's probably two ways I can finish this lineup. I can come all the way back up the top here and hit Ollie Wines, and then I can come down here and say get the Rosie or Pal Pepper. Or alternatively, I can get Carl Amon, which we haven't really discussed about. He's at 14,960, back-to-back 130s.
Unreal.
If Powell get off the chain here, you'll need him in your lineups or your lineups at sunk. So I'm going to see if he matches Ollie Wines, and that leaves me 12,710 for Scotty Pendlebury.
There you go.
Your thoughts? I know Jamie here, he said there's more pies in a bakery, but
it's like watching an old movie. It's black and white everywhere.
It is black and white everywhere. Look, when I first started looking at these teams earlier today, I thought, well, look at the data. Sure, pies are starting restricting opposition. Sure, they are getting beaten on the scoreboard, but in terms of fantasy, they're going toe-to-toe with other teams. And it's just the prices on Draftstars mean that we can get these guys in. I just prefer them over Port players. If you are going to run the Port stack, you'll have to get rid of Grundy. You'll probably have to get rid of DeGoey and things like that and build your teams like that.
Oh, I could see a DeGoey and 8 Port players coming up trumps. No, you probably need these cheap pies guys, don't you? There's not much. They're pretty exposed, the Port Power guys. There's not a whole lot of hidden value there in those prices. So yeah, it might be an interesting one. There might be the Port for the win, but for the pies in fantasy.
All right, Hef. It's just the one preview that we need to do tonight. So I wanted to thank you for your time for breaking down the Power and the Magpies for our $75,000 prize pool. Thanks so much, mate.
Thank you. I thought you were going to hit me up for one on the weekend, but she's lucky because I haven't looked at the other games. So I can't tell you anything.
Well, maybe next week you get in the lab next week and have some weekend teams ready to go.
Saturday special.
Little Saturday special. Thanks to all the viewers for watching the latest edition of the DFS Down Under Show. Nice little short and sharp edition for you tonight, and we look forward to seeing you for round 20 as we build up to the Draftstars AFL Live Final. Thanks very much, Hef. Thanks for that.
Thank you. See you next week.
See you next week. Cheers.